I'm going to say a bit about koans, traditional koans, and then kind of talk about how to use the practice with everyday life koans, questions and matters that come up in everyday life. Yeah. So as some of you know, maybe most of you know, and koan practice is unique to the Rinzai Zen form. There are two remaining strains or flavors of Zen, in the world right now, Soto and Rinzai. There used to be 5 schools of Zen. Well, there used to be no schools of Zen. Then there was 1 school of Zen. Then there were 2 schools of Zen. And then there were 5 schools of Zen. And now there's kind of back down to 2 schools of Zen. And all of that unfolded over around 1,500 years. Yeah. And each of the schools had different approaches to this practice of unification, unifying body and mind, dropping away body and mind, recognizing true self is no self. So the 2 remaining schools, in the globe now, are the Soto school and the Rinzai school. The Soto school focuses on a form of practice that we call shikantaza, or just sitting, which is often described as single-pointed awareness, where the single point is the whole universe. So, in the context of attentional modes of awareness, we can say we have a focus mode and a field mode. Focus mode, where we're focused on something, an object, in the foreground, and field mode, which is kind of the background, where there's nothing in particular, but there still is a field of awareness coming in. Shikantaza combines focus and field mode. So it's single-pointed concentration on one thing. I'm going to put thing in quotes, where that single thing is the entire universe. So within that form of concentration or meditation, divisions between inside and outside, between me and you, between now and then, all of these orienting structures of our consciousness that kind of situate us in time and place and identity, kind of dissolve, and it becomes a unity. Okay. And shikantaza is being actively present, not passively, actively present, participating as that single point. Koan practice, which is the emphasis of the Rinzai school, also practices shikantaza, but has a series of koans which are derived from the history of Zen practice and are typically are expressed as encounters between people. Oftentimes a master and a monk, a student and a teacher, but not always. Sometimes it's between 2 teachers, sometimes it's between 2 people. In various configurations. And the koans are situations in which really core elemental identifications that we hold are kind of brought to light, they're crystallized. And when we bring our consciousness to these kind of core identifications that we have, it's possible that something can shift dramatically in the awareness of the matter, and our own understanding shifts about ourselves. So we can have very big shifts in our understanding of who we are, what we identify with and what we're attached to. Our attachments, our identifications get brought up and activated and oftentimes released as we look at these koans with meditative awareness. So I'm going to say some more about koans here. I'll just mention here too that we talk in Zen about these three attitudes or minds of practice. We talk about three minds of practice: great faith, great doubt, and great determination. You might have heard those phrases. So Shikantaza sort of is the primary practice of great faith, where it's just being fully participant as the universe itself. There's great energy in it. And there's also great faith, because there's a total restfulness in what is present without any seeking for anything other than what is present right now. Okay? The koan mind that's brought to the practice is the mind of great doubt, great doubt, okay? Or you could say great questioning or great curiosity. And we do make a distinction between great doubt and small doubt when we bring our minds to address a koan. And this will be important as we work on our personal, everyday koans. The mind of small doubt is one that is looking to fix a situation. Okay? It's looking to, oftentimes get out of an unpleasant situation. And it's also a mind that questions one's own inherent nature. So there's a lot of self-doubt. When we talk about self-doubt, that's the mind of, that's a small doubt. Where we have some idea about ourselves, and then we're holding ourselves up to that idea, and we usually find ourselves to be lacking. And then that mind kind of spins out around that. That's not great doubt. Great doubt is, I like curiosity, actually. The sense of, what is this? What is this? What is this happening? It's a emotional posture with respect to the great mystery of being. It says, what is this? Who am I? Who am I? Okay? And it does, it is often motivated by a sense that the maybe conventional, one's own conventional understanding is a little bit off, doesn't quite work. That there's a gap. There's a gap. So it's, what is it? What is this? Koans always point to a gap between what is and one's own ability to be with what is. You could say it's the gap between what is and what if. The mind of what if is always like, oh, what about this? What about that? If only I did this, if only I did that. Or what if this happens? What if that happens? And kind of a worrisome mind. Whereas the mind of what is can be completely present with what is. So there's often a gap. So our root koan is, many of you know, in the Rinzai tradition, it's basically the question, who am I? Okay? Joshu's mu is really the question, who am I? The monk asked Master Joshu, does a dog have Buddha nature? Joshu answered, mu. Right? So the monk is asking, who am I? Now, what's motivating that question? There's a gap in the monk He's told that all beings are whole and complete as they are, that they intrinsically possess this Buddha nature, which is described as being formless, non-dual, includes everything, one body. But he doesn't feel himself that way. So there's the gap. Now, it really is a gap between an idea of himself and how he experiences himself to be. And that's what he presents. Now, there's something in the way that Joshu responds to that, is he turns the monk in on himself, and that's how we use the koan, is we turn in and we turn into experience. What is it that is creating that gap? Who is it that's asking that question? Who is it that's asking that question? So koans kind of invite us to go right into the gap, okay, not to hold ourselves back from it, and then design a way to get through it. You know, it's a big canyon, one side and the other. So the way you penetrate a koan is not to fashion a bridge over the canyon. What is it? Jump into the canyon. Okay, I'm using a metaphor here, but that's kind of what it is. You think about the space between, yeah, say the space between me and you. Okay, that space separates us, you could say, if you look at it in a certain way. But if you look at it in another way, it's actually what connects us. So if we actually somehow inhabit or animate the space between, that's what closes the gap itself. Azumi Roshi said, you know, to practice Zen, the practice of Zen is to close the gap between yourself and yourself, your small s self and your big S self. Okay, your small s self is our personality or our biological identity or psychological identity. It's the thing that we typically include as that which is named by our name and defined by our body. That's the small self. And the big self is our true nature as Buddha nature, as awake awareness itself. It's the big S self. So to close the gap between the small self and the big self, it isn't to pull them closer to each other. What is it? It's actually animating, bringing to consciousness, bringing to life, bringing one's own heart to the space between, living it, living into it, so that neither of them disappear. Both of them still are fully present. You could say they interpenetrate each other. So how do we throw ourselves into that gap? So there's a famous koan, which I'll remind us of. A monk asked Master Tozan, how can I avoid the extremes of heat and cold? So what's he asking? He's representing that there are severe, extreme experiences that are very unpleasant. And how do we not experience them? Okay. So read in his question, you can see he's setting up a project for himself to have a better, more perfect, more comfortable life. I would offer that this is a drive that we all have every day. How do I feel better about things, about myself, and not feel worse about things or about myself? How do I do that? Right. So maybe he's asking, how can I be okay with all of that? He didn't quite put it that way. Maybe he did want to avoid them. But so Master Tozan says, when you're cold, be completely cold. When you're hot, be completely hot. In some translations, it says, when you're cold, kill yourself with cold. When you're hot, kill yourself with hot. Kill yourself with the heat. So that's to be so completely absorbed as the experience that you want to avoid, that you don't want to experience, that you want to transcend or you want to resolve. Throw yourself right into. So with hot and cold, that's one thing. I've shared the story about my teacher Shishin Roshi practicing this koan when he was called to test out a wetsuit for the Navy back when he first started practicing Zen. And it was a very, very frigid environment that he was put into. And they told him to just stay down in this wetsuit in this really, really frigid tank for as long as he could, and then to just knock on the window when he needed to come up, and he couldn't stand it anymore. And he practiced this koan, and he just allowed himself to feel the intimate, extremely uncomfortable, even painful sensation of the cold of the water, every little bit at which it touched his skin, permeating through the wetsuit. And he just felt it. He just allowed himself to feel it. And then finally, after a certain period of time, he lost track of time, and they pulled him out. He didn't ask to be pulled out, and they challenged him, and they said, "What were you doing down there?" And he didn't want to tell them that he was meditating, because it was in the late 60s, and this was the Navy, and he thought it wouldn't be taken well. So he just said, "Nothing, I was just doing what you said. I was just staying as long as I could." Why? They said, "Well, you've been down there for 45 minutes, which is 3 times longer than anybody has been able to stay down there." Okay. So that power, that capacity, did he transcend that condition? Yeah, he did. He wasn't controlled by his avoidance of that extreme. And I imagine too, in some ways, at some level, he kind of killed himself with that cold. Was he worrying about anything? No, I doubt it. He was fully absorbed in dealing with that condition. Sure, everybody here has had experiences of just, extreme pain, extreme discomfort, maybe extreme distress, where it completely takes over your body and mind. Completely takes over your mind. You could say you lose yourself, in that sensation. So can we do that? Can we lose ourselves really lose ourselves in a difficult situation or a difficult condition? Really lose ourselves so much that there can become a real shift. Like it's not only just temporary, but something, and I'm telling you, something profound can shift within that experience, where you recognize an identification or a holding, an attachment that you've been holding on to for a long time about who you were, who you are, that suddenly lets go of its grip on you, and it doesn't come back. Oh, I've been really dependent on other people thinking well of me. I've been really attached to other people's opinions about me. This is an example. So the attachment comes because I want to be liked and respected, and I'm not always liked and respected. And I'm uncomfortable with the feeling that arises when that happens. How do I deal with that? Well, to work with it as a koan, we go into the feeling that we feel when we are disliked, rejected. And we kill ourselves. It's a little harsh language, but we lose ourselves. We lose ourselves in that feeling. And it's possible to, this isn't like meant to be masochistic at all. This is meant to be liberation. A liberation. You can so completely embrace that feeling of being rejected and allow it to be in your body, allow it to be present with you. Not push it away, not need yourself to be any different. And in a way, incorporate it into your identity. Yeah, incorporate it into your identity, right? Because it's the resistance to including that feeling in who you are that causes it in the first place. I'm a good person. I'm valuable. I don't want to be rejected. But if we can include that rejection, then suddenly you yourself have expanded. Your whole identity expands when you can include that uncomfortable feeling. And then you're like, oh, that's not who I am. This is who I am. So you throw yourself into the question, into the gap, into the feeling that arises, in the situation of distress. So our root koan I talked about, mu, is who am I? And that's a basic root koan because it gets at this gap between who I think I am and who I really am. Okay, not all koans go to that level of core identification. They also apply to things like, like I just said, like my relationship to other people's regard. Okay, there's a certain attachment in that. There's a certain identification in that. Okay. There's koans around who am I in relation with specific other people. So for example, a teacher figure, or a parent figure, or a lover figure, or a student figure. Okay? We typically define ourselves by our roles. Okay. So we have attachment to those roles in a certain way, and we have some identification around that role. And then, when things go according to plan, according to the role definition, the teacher acts like a teacher, the student acts like a student, everything is kind of in line. Okay, so things go smoothly. And then we can just continue with those identifications. But then might come a time where, there's something off here. There's something off. And that offness might be pointing to the fact that, guess what? You're not defined by being a teacher. Or you're not defined by being a student. So, can you use that gap to release yourself from that identification and not be limited by it? Okay. So koans can come up in every day. Every day, koans can come up. And they're coming up when there's that kind of, there's that gap in your experience. Like there's something off, I want things to be different, okay? I think we have to recognize that we live so much of our lives with a certain amount of our attention sort of moving into the past, thinking about the past, reflecting on the past, the things that happened are present in our mind, and we might have some rumination about them. Maybe we even have some judgment about them, things that we did or things that other people did. There could be woundings and pain that we've experienced in the past, and we're wrestling with that in some way. We might be feeling it, we might be feeling ourselves constricted by it. Okay. And then a certain amount of our attention, maybe a large amount of our attention, is projecting into the future and is planning and speculating and preparing and trying to control things so that things work out okay. Okay, there's so much there. And, how much is left for the moment once all the bandwidth is taken by those two things, right? So of course, our basic Zazen practice is to over and over and over return more and more of that consciousness, that awareness to the present moment, right? And to allow that to expand. And then the past and the future thinking gets included into the present moment, but only insofar as it is arising in the present moment in our bodies, not in our minds. Because our minds can go all over space and time. But our bodies are right here. So that's why the body is truly the portal to the now. So now, within the now, okay, arisings, feelings, thoughts. Okay. But then we experience something. There's a gap, there's something. And then we start to worry about it, and we start to question it, and we start getting up into our heads. There's a koan. There's the koan right there. What is separating us from right now? From being fully present? What is it that kind of gets in the way? It keeps us from being right here. So this is the invitation here to we'll sit for 10 minutes, and you can reflect on what is it perhaps in your life, at this time in your days, and maybe it's in your moment, your day right now. It could be very now oriented. That is kind of pulling you out of the present moment. Is there a question? Is there a relationship? Is there an issue? Is there a concern that moves you into a kind of ruminative or fix-it mind and pulls you out? Okay, and these are good questions. These are good things. Koans are wonderful tools. Right? These questions are good questions to have. They're the way that we wake up. They're the way that we notice what we're attached to. So sometimes we have this, oh, I shouldn't have that question, or that shouldn't be an issue for me, or these things. No, these are the doorways. Yeah. So I invite you to sit and see what are those things that are, maybe present for you in your day, in your moment, or in your life right now. Seem to be pulling you into something, and pulling you away from just being okay, being fully present with everything. Okay. Maybe something about a question about yourself, a reaction you've had, a relationship. It could be a professional situation. So think that, and then we'll go around and you can share that, and then we'll just, it's not a test. I think we'll just do this as a dialogue. We'll dialogue about, your koan, and, just talk about how to practice with it. Yeah, I'm not gonna, pass you on the koan or tell you how to answer it or anything like that. It'll be more of a dialogue around these life koans. Okay. So, okay.